Robert Kilroy Silk.
Over the years, I've been invited several times to appear as a guest on Robert Kilroy Silk's morning programme, where I have enjoyed healthy debate with other guests, both those who are sceptical of the gift of mediumship and those who believe wholeheartedly in communication with the world of spirit. I would describe Robert Kilroy Silk as an open-minded skeptic, who does a good job of flushing out the charlatans, but quite readily admits that his own grandmother read the tea leaves. I can recall one occasion during a Kilroy programme when my heart was made to flutter. The subject of the day was psychics and mediums, and Yvette Fielding and I had been invited to appear to represent Most Haunted. Debate was brisk, with one particularly sceptical gentleman holding the floor. One or two other equally sceptical audience members were also putting forward their points of view, and things were not looking very good for the psychics. The microphone was passed to one jovial Liverpool chap who had put up his hand to make a point. "Well," he said, "I don't believe in psychics and mediums generally. I've spent thousands of pounds visiting them to try and find answers, but I consider that they've all been a waste of money." With the man having such a broad Liverpool accent, all eyes turned scathingly in my direction, as it was more or less obvious that he would have at some time consulted me. "However," he continued, "there's one psychic I did visit, and I was gobsmacked when everything he told me turned out to be true. That psychic was Derek Acorah." He turned and pointed to me. "I went to see Derek when he had his office in Liverpool. I was desperate for a job, as I'd been out of work for a long time, and I thought I'd give him a try to see whether there was anything in the pipeline for me. He told me that I'd see a job in the Echo. He told me to apply for the job and I'd get it." The man laughed as he added, "Anybody from Liverpool knows that it's hopeless looking for a job in the Echo because there are never any ordinary ones advertised." Derek told me the job would be out of the Liverpool area and that I would be working and living next to playing fields and a park. He told me that I would be very happy in my job and it would be a long-term appointment. I went away thinking, another waste of money, but nonetheless looked in the situations vacant column on the Thursday just as Derek had told me. Lo and behold, there was a job advertised which suited me, so I applied for it and got it, just as Derek had told me. It was out of the Liverpool area. It was a school caretaker's job, and part of that job included caring for the playing fields. My house is in the park next to the playing fields. I'm really very happy with the job, and I've been doing it ever since." I breathed a huge sigh of relief.
From Euston to Liverpool.
I had just appeared on Living TV's magazine-style programme, Loose Lips, hosted by Richard Arnold and Melinda Messenger, and was due at Euston Station to catch the 7 p.m. train back to Lime Street Station in Liverpool. As I was making my way to platform 7, a young man approached me. "Are you Derek Acorah?" I said I was. "Great to meet you in the flesh. Would you do me a favour and speak to one of your biggest fans?" I glanced at my watch. I'm actually in a tremendous hurry as I have to catch a train, but I will speak for a moment. I took the telephone from him and heard a lady's voice asking who it was. I told her that it was Derek Acorah. "Never. You're kidding me. Paul's winding me up." Paul reached for the telephone. "Don't put the phone down, Lisa. It really is Derek Acorah." He handed the telephone back to me. "Can I ask you a very important question, Derek?" she asked. "Tell me if it's not possible." I told her that I was just about to catch a train, but if she would give me her telephone number, I would give her a call as soon as I was on board. I said a hurried goodbye to Paul and sprinted down the platform, jumping on the train with only a moment or two to spare. After I'd settled myself down in a vacant seat, I picked up my telephone and dialed Lisa's number. "Thanks so much for contacting me, Derek," she said. "I wanted to speak to you because, at the moment, my dad, Graham, is quite ill in hospital undergoing tests." "Will he be okay, Derek?" I couldn't cope if anything was to happen to him. We lost Mum just 2 short years ago, and we're still trying to come to terms with that. When I opened myself up mentally to Lisa's question, I quickly became aware of a spirit person who had drawn close to me, a man with what seemed to be chronic chest pain. He seemed to be somewhat bewildered, and he had a problem with his left leg. I tried to communicate with him, but I was finding it impossible. So Sam stepped in. Sam told me that the man in spirit was Lisa's father, Graham, that he had left this physical world less than 30 minutes earlier, and that he was concerned that his daughter had not received a telephone call from the hospital. I was shocked. Here I was talking on the telephone to Lisa, and she was unaware that her father had passed to the spirit world. "Are you at home, Lisa?" I asked her. She told me no, she was at her friend Andrea's house. "I feel that you should contact the hospital immediately," I told her. Lisa promised that she would and hung up. A few moments later, my mobile telephone rang again. It was Paul. He asked whether I had managed to catch my train and thanked me for speaking to Lisa. He told me that she had been in touch with him, and instead of telephoning the hospital, had jumped into her car and had driven directly to the hospital. I leaned wearily back into my seat. As I closed my eyes, I became aware of Lisa's father. Sam was again acting as a communicator. He told me that Graham had been met by his mother, father and grandmother as he passed to the world of spirit. But his greatest thrill was to be reunited with his beloved wife Jane. He was so excited and wanted Lisa and Paul to know that the parents were reunited and not to worry. I was pleased to hear of the reunion, but I was saddened to contemplate the shock which Lisa and Paul would have to endure. The ringing of my mobile phone broke into my thoughts. It was Lisa. She was sobbing. "Derek, my dad's dead. I can't believe it. I knew he was ill, but I thought he would come out of hospital and come home again." "What you said when you asked me to telephone the hospital, did you know?" I must know this. I explained to Lisa as gently as possible that her dad had come to me earlier when I was speaking to her. She told me that when she arrived at the hospital, they had told her that they had been trying to contact her for almost 2 hours, but had not been able to do so. She felt so guilty at missing her father's last moments here on earth. "Don't feel guilty," I advised her. "There is no need. Your father was met by his mother and father and your lovely mum. They knew that he was ready to be received into God's kingdom. I know it is the most horrible thing to experience the loss of a parent, but you have your life ahead of you, and your mum and dad will always be around you. They'll celebrate the good things in your life, and they'll be there to help you through the harder times. What you must remember is that they are not lost to you." "Thank you, Derek," Lisa said. "Do you think that Paul was meant to bump into you at Euston Station?" "I think there's a very strong possibility," I replied.
Meeting my spirit guide.
We all have a main spirit guide, or guardian as some people call them, who is designated at our birth. And many of you will be familiar with my spirit guide, Sam, having seen and heard me converse with him on television and radio. I've been asked on numerous occasions how it happened that I have Sam as my spirit guide, how we met, and how we became so close. The story begins over 2,000 years ago, when I was incarnated as a member of a family who lived in Ethiopia. I was one of 5 children, having 2 brothers and 2 sisters. We were all expected to help my mother and father to scratch a living from the barren Ethiopian land in which we lived. I, however, was a rebel even then, and often used to wander off on my own. In those days, many travellers used to pass through our village. One of these was well known to us all. His name was Masumai. He used to speak to us of times of change, of why we were all here on this earth, and of what was expected of us. became evident to me that he was blessed with special gifts, gifts which neither my father nor my mother possessed. Although we were peaceful people, at times feuds would occur. One awful day, a large group of men invaded our village. There was much screaming and shouting, and some homes were set alight. Many people were killed, my mother, father, brothers and sisters amongst them. I escaped harm because I had wandered a short distance from the village. When I heard the noise of battle, I hid in some bushes on the outskirts. When the noise subsided and night fell, I crept back to my home, which had escaped the fires of the invaders. I was alone and terrified. My 9-year-old eyes had witnessed so much, but eventually exhaustion took over and I slept. I stayed there on my own for 3 days. On the 4th day, I heard a loud noise outside and someone shouting my name over and over. It was Masumai. I ran to him, crying uncontrollably. He put his arm around me and held me close, whilst I relayed to him what had happened to our village. He listened and held me tenderly, whilst he calmed me down. Masumai explained to me that my family were beyond hurt now, and that they were in a world where no harm could come to them, and that one day I would be reunited with them. He told me that until that time came, he would be a father to me. After that day, Masumai and I left the village. We walked to places I'd never heard of, relying on the people of villages to offer food and shelter to us in return for Masumai's guidance. Weeks, months, and years of being with Masumai, listening to him talking to people, afforded me a deeper understanding of this great yet simple man. He told me that one day I would be like him, but not yet, as I was only 13 years old. Eventually we found ourselves in an area which was unknown even to Masumai. He told me that we would have to be careful in our approach. We discovered that the people were not very friendly and had no regard for Masumai's teachings, and decided that we should move on. We both felt that these people could be similar to those who had attacked my village 4 years earlier. We carried on walking until we reached a small hill with some bushes, which we felt would provide some cover for us for the night. We were both very hungry. Masumai asked me to find some small pieces of wood so we could light a fire and at least be warm. I moved further and further away until I reached the edge of the village through which we passed earlier. Although I knew it was wrong to steal, I thought of how hungry and tired Masumai had looked, and I crawled very slowly to a window ledge where loaves of bread were cooling, grabbed a small loaf and crawled away. I was almost back to the place where Masumai and I had set up camp when I heard shouting. Before I knew it, I was surrounded by a circle of men. I felt a harsh pain in my side and then in my leg, and I fell down. I felt as though I was falling backwards as I lost consciousness. My attackers, thinking I was dead, left and returned to the village. The next thing I remember is hearing the voice I loved and trusted. Masumai was holding me close in his arms and crying, his tears falling onto my chest. I told him not to cry, but to look into my clothes, as there was bread hidden there. He tried to stem the flow of blood from my wounds, but he knew that he could not save me. He told me I would have to come back to a new life, and that when the time arrived, he would be by my side. He would be my guiding influence from the heavenly side, because by that time he too would have undertaken the journey I was about to make. He told me that the stealing of the bread had been a spiritual act, because I had not stolen it for myself, but to help another. But he said, there is a payment to be made for all things. And so it was that after the end of my football career and my first marriage, I was at a crossroads in my life. It was at this point that Masumai came back to me one evening when I was at home alone. And why Sam now and not Masumai? The reason is simple. It is Sam's wish. He knew that I would be reincarnated into a white Western world and would not go back to the country where we first met. And he also knew that he would fulfill the promise he'd made to me 2,000 years earlier.